Hi, and welcome to this month's Regional Guide. For those of you who don't know me already, my name's Rebecca, and I'm going to show you around South Africa's most famous wine region, Stellenbosch. Last month we went to Rioja, home to one of my favourite grapes, the smooth and tannic Tempranillo. But this month we're heading down to the southern hemisphere, to sunny Stellenbosch. And although this is technically in the new world of wine, viticulture still dates back centuries here. In fact, the very first harvest can be traced all the way back to the Constantia estate in 1659. So, are you ready to discover more about Stellenbosch? Travel south across the African continent through the Sahara Desert and sand dunes, past the equator, leave the Congo behind you, keep going, and eventually you'll reach South Africa. And then keep going still, past Johannesburg and Swaziland and across to the Western Cape, and you'll arrive at the leafy university town of Stellenbosch. Now, you might not have even heard of Stellenbosch before, but don't panic because this isn't a very large town. It only has a population of around 155,000. That's the same as Blackpool. Even Bath is bigger than that. But you will know Cape Town, its giant big brother, which is just 40 kilometers west of Stellenbosch. So we've got Cape Town to the west. Now to the east of the region is the excellent wine-producing town of Paarl, so watch out for a guide on that area coming soon. And then Franschhoek is another gem of a wine region. So already Stellenbosch is surrounded by some renowned wine producers. But what about Stellenbosch itself? Well, for starters, if you want to study wine as well as drink it, you could do far, far worse than coming here. Because this is a real university town. And as you'd hope, its college has an excellent viticulture and enology department. In fact, it was right here back in 1925 that Professor Abraham Isaac Perrault created Pinotage. But we'll get to that later in the guide. Stellenbosch is also known for its stunning Cape Dutch architecture that dates back to the early 17th century, because this is the oldest town in South Africa after Cape Town, and hasn't been subjected to the mass development of its nearby brother. The other quality that makes Stellenbosch so very special, and what impacts directly on the wine it produces, is its stunning mountainous backdrop. The town is flanked by no fewer than 3 mountain ranges: the Stellenbosch Mountain to the south, the Jonkershoek Range to the southeast, and the Zoomensberg Mountains to the northeast. And finally, Stellenbosch is of course also famous for the Stellenbosch wine route that was established in 1971 and has been officially known as the Stellenbosch American Express wine route since 2002. The leafy town of Stellenbosch was founded in 1679 by Simon van der Stel, who was the governor of the Dutch settlement Cape Colony. Van der Stel loved wine and had already established South Africa's very first and very successful wine estate, the Constantia estate in Cape Town, just a few years earlier. In fact, the sweet dessert wine that was made in Constantia was popular all over the wine-drinking world, and so it wasn't long before he began planting vines in Stellenbosch. And then a few years later, a group of French Huguenots arrived to the area. The Protestant Huguenots had been driven out of a hostile Roman Catholic France into the Netherlands and eventually joined the Dutch on their long journey to South Africa. And with them they brought a rich knowledge of viticulture and so began establishing even more wine estates. In fact, the town of Franschhoek, which lies just 30 kilometers up the road from Stellenbosch and which also produces exceptional wines, means French corner in Dutch. Winemaking then flourished throughout the 1800s, partly thanks to the thriving export trade Stellenbosch had with Britain. Because at the time, Britain was at war with France and so unable to import wine from her Gallic neighbour and began importing wines from South Africa instead. But then later that century, disaster struck. First, Britain made peace with France, putting an end to that roaring wine trade, and then the phylloxera pest arrived and devastated vineyards across Stellenbosch. This turbulent time was followed by the Anglo-Boer War, and it wasn't until the 1900s that the wine industry began to recover thanks to a new wine cooperative that helped stabilize the market. But even so, because of South Africa's apartheid regime, many countries boycotted South African wines throughout the 20th century. But in 1994, the late Nelson Mandela came to power, helping to revitalise Stellenbosch's wine trade and really put South Africa on the map. South Africa is the 9th largest producer of wine in the world and exports much of its wine to us. In fact, in 2013, us Brits imported over 110 million litres of wine, making us the largest importer of South African wine in the world. Stellenbosch, meanwhile, is home to nearly a fifth of all the vines planted in South Africa and has around 150 different producers. And the most produced wine overall here is Cabernet Sauvignon, which is often blended with Merlot to make Bordeaux-style blends. Of course, white grapes also grow very well here, and white wine blends are typical of the region too. Land, as you would imagine for such a small region, is intensely farmed in Stellenbosch, and the variation in soils has a huge impact on production. So much so, the area has been divided up into wards, which are like appellations, and there are 7 wards altogether. These are Banghoek, Bottelary, Devon Valley, Jonkershoek Valley, Papegaaieberg, Polkerdry Hills, and Ziemensberg Stellenbosch. Now try saying that after a few glasses of Stellenbosch wine. The last ward, the Ziemensberg Stellenbosch, was the first to gain official recognition and sits in the shadows of the magnificent Ziemensberg mountain range. In fact, many vineyards are planted at high altitudes up the mountainsides itself, where the cooler climate gives the wine a distinctive character. In the mountains east of Stellenbosch is the small Jonkershoek Valley, which is towered over by the Jonkershoek Mountains and the Stellenbosch Mountains. This appellation is home to particularly fine Cabernet Sauvignons. On the other side of town is the very small Papegaaieberg ward, which means Parrot Mountain in Afrikaans. And if you travel north, you'll reach Devon Valley, which gained official status in 1997. This ward is best known for its red wines and excellent soils formed by the decomposed granite. So, as we've already discussed, Stellenbosch is famous for its stunning mountainous backdrops, but also for its streets lined with majestic oaks. And with False Bay only 20 kilometers south of the region, it's blessed with cooling Atlantic Ocean breezes that prevent its grapes from maturing too quickly. Stellenbosch enjoys a typically Mediterranean climate, which is ideal for growing vines. On average, the summers are dry and warm here, with average midday temperatures ranging from 15 degrees Celsius in July to 20 degrees Celsius in February. The region is the coldest during July, when the temperatures drop to around 6 degrees on average a night. And there's plenty of sunshine too, with over 300 hours a month in the summer months of November, December and January. It's all about the mountains in Stellenbosch. Not only do they make Stellenbosch one of the most stunningly beautiful wine-producing areas in the world, but they make stunning wines. There are several ranges you should be at least aware of. These are the Stellenbosch Mountains, the Ziemensberg Mountains, Jonkershoek, Hottentot Holland, Stellenbosch and Hulderberg ranges. Now don't worry, we're not going to test you, but try and have an idea of these mountains. And vines are grown across these mountain ranges at varying altitudes, which helps to produce all the different characteristics of Stellenbosch wines. Stellenbosch is famous among wine producers for its decomposed granite soils, which are perfectly suited for the production of red wines in particular, and tend to be found at higher altitudes. Meanwhile, other parts of the region are made up of sandstone soil, which are better suited for white wines. But of course, it's not that simple. There are as many as 50 different soil types in Stellenbosch, which is why it's so perfect for producing so many different wines. This beautiful town is built on the banks of the Eerste River, which means first river in Afrikaans, and which gives you an idea of how old this place is. This luscious river flows through the region, keeping it watered and fresh. When you think of South African wine, you may well think of Chenin Blanc, and it used to be the most widely grown vine in the region, but it's since been overtaken by Cabernet Sauvignon. That said, it remains the most planted grape in South Africa generally, partly due to its incredible versatility. Chenin Blanc produces wines across the spectrum from dry to sweet and is also used to make sherry, brandy and spirits. It has a medium to high acidity and aromas that include apple, passion fruit and apricot, as well as honey and hay. Chenin Blanc is most widely grown in South Africa, and then France, Argentina, USA and Australia. Another popular grape in this region is the ubiquitous Chardonnay grape. Chardonnay varies enormously, and much of this variation is down to whether it's been oaked or not. Oaked Chardonnay is buttery and straw-coloured with aromas of vanilla, caramelised sugar and pastry, whereas an unoaked Chardonnay can be completely different and is much drier with notes of lemon and apple. Its acidity also depends on whether it's been oaked or not. An oaked Chardonnay will have a medium to low acidity, whereas an unoaked Chardonnay is more likely to have a medium to high acidity. Of course, Chardonnay is grown all over the world, including France, the US, Australia, Italy, Argentina, and Chile. This is another massively popular grape in Stellenbosch and used to be the second grape after Chenin Blanc. It has a medium acidity and is used to make dry wines. Some typical fruit aromas you'll find with Chenin Blanc are lime, passion fruit, and apple, while other aromas include bell pepper and tarragon. This grape is also famous for producing wines with a slight green hue to them. Sauvignon Blanc is of course grown all over the world, but it's mostly planted in France, Italy, New Zealand, the US, Chile, South Africa, and Australia. This is the most widely planted grape in the region and is often blended with Merlot and Cabernet Franc to make Bordeaux-style wines. Its most recognizable aroma is black fruits, in particular cherry and blackcurrant, but when aged in newish oak, it can often smell like tobacco and cedar. Cabernet Sauvignon has medium to high tannin and medium to high acidity and can be grown, well, pretty much anywhere you can grow vines, but it's mostly grown in France, Chile, the US, down south in Australia, Italy, South Africa, and Argentina. The popular MERLOT grape is the second most planted grape in Stellenbosch and is often used as a blending partner for Cabernet Sauvignon, thanks to its less tannic and acidic nature, which adds a softness to the blend. So we give it a medium for tannin and a medium for acidity. And typical aromas include cherry, raspberry, plum, and also cedar, tobacco. Merlot is cultivated all over the wine-growing world, but is mostly found in France, Italy, the US, Australia, Chile, and Argentina, pretty much where Cabernet Sauvignon is also grown. So now we're on to Pinotage. This grape was born right here in Stellenbosch in 1925 by the Professor Abraham Perrault, who crossed Cinsault with Pinot Noir. Now, as you may have already guessed, Perrault was hoping to produce a grape that's as easy to grow as Cinsault, but that produces wines as delicious as Pinot Noir. But that's not quite what happened. Instead, the grapes turned out to be very, very dark and produced a wine high in tannins, so not like Pinot Noir at all. But that doesn't make Pinotage a bad wine. Far, far from it, and it's still grown widely across South Africa. Some of the typical aromas you should find when you smell Pinotage include blackberry, blackcurrant, red fruits, and earthy, smoky smells. Pinotage is mostly grown in South Africa, but is also grown a little in Brazil, Canada, Israel, New Zealand, the US, and Zimbabwe. So Shiraz is called Syrah in the Old World and is one of the darkest and most full-bodied wines. It has a medium to high tannin and medium to high acidity and can smell like olives, herbs, as well as blueberry and blackberry. It's most widely grown in France and Australia, but is also very common in Spain, Argentina, and of course South Africa, as well as the US, Italy, and Chile.